So have you watched Self, the new Spark short from Disney? Wow, we have so much to talk about. So the format that I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to talk about the director herself and her vision for when she obviously set to create this and what message she wanted to portray. I will input some links underneath my video so that you can go away and have a look at those videos for yourself and form your own opinions. I'm then going to talk about my view and my interpretation and analysis of the short, and then I'm going to talk about other people's view, because I've heard very mixed things, mainly in the comment section, as you'd expect, some negative things about how they actually believe it's further perpetuating the problem, and I will kind of give you insight into that. However, I'm also going to give you insight into some of other people's views that I've come across. I have a really, really good friend who also works in a school, and she basically shared this with some of her students, some of her male students, and she got feedback off them and how they all had a really unique view and takeaway from this short. So the videos that I found from the director, she talks about how for herself, the important message in this video was that self actually stood for self-sabotage. And that actually, for me, is why the E, I'm assuming maybe that is something to do with esteem, as in self-esteem. The E in the actual self is broken, which obviously for any of you who've watched, if you haven't, please check out now, go watch it and come back. But for anybody who's watched, will know that that relates also to the ending where her face becomes cracked. But anyone who knows me knows that I don't stop there. I don't believe that one singular meaning is rarely the case. That's the reason why I believe that the fact that it's the E is something to do with the self-esteem of the person and the message that's being portrayed. The director also goes on to talk about how for her it is the self-sabotage of trying to fit into a community where you're different. So I'm pretty sure she talks about how she has an Ethiopian background and how she finds it quite hard to find her particular place within that community or the African American community. And it's about kind of her and her experiences and how she's navigated that, and she wanted to portray this message. My interpretation of it was, although for her it was about self-sabotage, and I could definitely see the current of that coming through. I could definitely see that message, now I've seen her talk about it, definitely comes through. I believed it was so multi-layered. I know that's totally my personality, and I will find multiple meanings in things even when I really don't want to, but I do. And it isn't always usually what everybody else sees, but again, please give me your take on it, whether you agree with me or whether you think something completely different. I'm not somebody who needs everybody to agree with me. Take the meat, leave the bones, decide for yourself, make your own opinion. But for me, I felt like the message was about self-abandonment and how in order to feel true connection with somebody, so I'm going to go through it chronologically in a minute, but in order to feel true connection with somebody, when the way you would connect with them requires you to be something different, it means that you are going to have to abandon self. And she is ultimately abandoning parts of herself as she falls into this pit of desperation to become like the other people.
Really wanted to focus in the film of like, not only did I struggle to fit in, but like how I kind of do the exact opposite of what I should have in order to belong, and then me suffering the consequences of it. And the second part of two is just like, this is like an immigrant story, and it was really important to me to kind of talk about like kind of like the African experience of moving to an urban city, which is something my mom and dad went through too when they came to America.
So the first thing that I noticed and I interpreted was that initially she has no uncomfortableness in being herself. She's quite happy to be herself. She is quite connected to herself. That's what I think that this signifies for me. Whenever that tap, although I know in the short film it is communication, that is the way that they communicate with one another. What I also think it indicates is in them tapping and that making a certain sound, it is almost a message, a communication of somebody who has something similar to them to be able to connect with that. That is ultimately where she finds her first problem. In going over to these people and they are tapping and communicating on all parts of their body, when she taps, she notices that the sound is different. She then begins to notice that she is different. She also notices that they are not acknowledging, connecting, and communicating with her in the same way. In fact, they are almost don't see that she's there at all. This ultimately triggers something inside of her, something that makes her feel a sense of hyper awareness about herself that she never turned on before, because there was no reason for her to dislike it up until this point, until she is in an arena, until she is in a place where she can ultimately no longer connect with these people, because they are all connecting on their threads of self that are like each other, and she doesn't feel able to do this. Next scene is where she's in a state of panic. She is almost doing this and like almost hyperventilating at the realization that I am not the same as these people. And she bumps into somebody, falls over, and hurts and breaks her hand. And for me, this signified the fact that once you get stuck in that mindset, once you get stuck in that space where instead of just noticing that you're different and that not necessarily instantaneously becoming a bad thing inside of you, which requires consciousness, awareness, and work, that because the truth is, as I see day in and day out, especially in my line of work as a therapist, but also in my private life, also in my personal experience, fundamentally from the core of us from a very young age, our instinct is that we want to connect with people. We want to be taken in. We want to be nurtured by people. We want to be accepted and loved. We want to form attachment. We are social creatures. So with that in mind, when we have a difference, whether it is my colour, whether it is potentially my gender or something like that, or maybe it is the fact that I am neurodivergent and I have very both obvious and subtle differences from the average person in the population, the instinct in me naturally, when it is first brought to my attention, is if they don't like that, abandon that and then still connect. I'm not saying in any way that that's the right thing. I have done my journey. I am no longer in that space. I teach people. I help people to also no longer be in that place. However, it is that sort of the reptilian mammal part of our brain that is the most developed. The understanding part of our brain, the cognitive part of our brain, does not understand that. It understands logically, but it can't. It's the same reason why I see so many times in sessions people go, I can understand something, I can intellectualize it, but I can't necessarily apply it into my framework of behavior and thoughts and feelings, because there needs to be some sort of deliberate intention and so deliberate awareness of doing that work in connecting those two worlds. Anyway, back to the story. Her then hurting her hand ultimately results in her making a wish to have the hand of somebody who can, because that's the initial thing that she does, can connect with people who are all connecting, that she's seeing lots and lots of, that she doesn't feel like she is. She then ultimately goes on a long journey, wishing for different parts of her body to change in order to be like other people. And she spends the vast majority of the central part of the short abandoning parts of herself and exchanging it for the ones that have been granted to her through her wish. For me, this signifies that it's a very slippery and easy slope to not notice what is going on fundamentally when you are promised something over the horizon. I see this a lot. I think that many people are shown things or they're promised things that make them think that their happiness is just over the brow of the hill if they achieve that, if they do that, if they have that. However, the thing that I always see in my practice. And I think it's because I see the most vulnerable parts of people when they know they are safe inside my therapeutical practice, is that they eventually get to a point where they realize that you cannot be somebody else and still be happy. The true part of who they are, all parts of who they are, the parts of themselves that maybe they accept and don't accept and everything in between, are yearning to be connected with and seen in their entirety. And that is the reason why we see so many people who are deeply unhappy, even though it seems that they have everything. And the woman in Self, for me, represents so many people. Although I know that the director had a very specific vision, and at the end of the day, the thing that I just kind of want to accolade is that she had a vision that she thought other people could relate to, and she did a great job of that, in my opinion. But it represents, yes, women of colour and the beauty standards of society, but it also represents anybody who is marginalised. It also represents anybody who is different and does not fit the typical mould of what is encouraged or is taught is acceptable, or just fits in effortlessly. And ultimately, at the end of the short, she gets everything that she wanted. She even puts herself at risk. I think that that's a subtle message as well. She has everything that she wished for, but at what cost? She even places herself at risk, and she falls down from the building, and the moment that she has been looking for is placed in front of her. Somebody sees her and they want to connect, and she has everything now to connect. But inside, behind all these parts that she's acquired, she knows that that is not her true self. And in the whirlwind of it all, and in the chase of it all, she runs forward to connect, and she steps on the reminder of herself, which is her face. When she sees her mask, her face, her true face, broken, it sparks something inside of her that makes her realise that she never wanted to hurt her. She never wanted to truly abandon her. She just wanted to connect. She just wanted to be truly seen and to feel like she fits in. And in the moment when she realised that, because hindsight is a wonderful thing, we might think we know what we truly want, and we might want it at any cost, but when you truly see what that entails and what that includes, she was then able to make the informed decision that she actually wanted to be her true self. She never meant to hurt her, but in the moment that she places on the mask, although broken, which I will go on to speak about in a minute, because one of the students that my friends work with acknowledges that, which I find really interesting, because it shows how many takeaways you can take depending on, I guess, your own frame of reference and the lens in which you see through. But ultimately, the woman that she was going to connect with has a moment of shock, but then a moment of seeing her in her truth. Because if you remember at the beginning, she didn't even see her. And I think the lesson or the takeaway for me that I interpreted this as is that when we aren't seen, because being seen is like the new fundamental love language. So there is obviously all the love languages that we know of, but now they're saying like the final love language that we need to acknowledge is that every single person, and this is so true, needs to be seen, but not seen in their mask. So for me, I've spent a long part of my life masking my true self, obviously being autistic, and not the mask, because even if somebody likes that part of me, and I'm doing so good at doing that, it's not me. And if somebody likes me when I straighten my hair, or when I wear certain makeup, or I dress a certain way, if that is not fundamentally how I want to, or it's not true to who I am, then even if it feels good, it's not true connection. And it's nice to be seen and seen in your entirety and seen for your truth. And then I just wanted to do a little final wrap up of what other people took away from this. So the thing that my friend noticed, which is absolutely amazing, the male students that she worked with when she did this was really receptive to it. Like, they responded so positively to it, and they had so many things to talk about, and they all put their final sort of takeaway of what they thought the most important message was on a post-it note, and I will share that with you. So a lot of them kind of obviously noticed that it's about acceptance of self. My friend spoke a lot about beauty standards and the kind of how much pressure women are under to look and be a certain way, which I think is fundamental. Even if the director, even though she doesn't mention it, didn't intentionally do that, she did a great job of that indirectly, I guess. And then I saw some negative reviews. So there was a guy reviewing on YouTube. Like I say, I will input all of the links underneath this video. But this woman, and you know what, everybody, I just want to quickly say before I share this, even though it's not a great experience, she basically said that she shared it with her African American daughter, who believed after watching it that the doll, the woman, should not have changed back because she looks so much better gold. And now she's become conscious that because the woman was brown, she now wants to be basically gold. I will input the comment. And some people felt like it was Disney's version of being like having a good agenda, but basically not truly having a good agenda, and just further perpetuating basically problems for people who actually struggle with these things. Although I do see and hear it exactly as they're saying it, I'm not going to try and change anybody's mind about their own personal interpretation of it. For me, the truth is, I genuinely believe, because of the standards of the way that the world is, I believe that, unfortunately, her little girl would end up coming across that message regardless. And isn't it a positive way to bring about and have that conversation about how the world is in a sensitive and childlike way before it gets inside and gets a hold of her? I know what that woman's saying. I know what her mother's saying. She's basically saying, you brought the problem to my door before it's even happened. What's to say it would happen? It probably would happen. I don't think I've ever met, and I'm in England, so maybe it's different in America, I'm not too sure, I've ever met somebody of colour who doesn't have this battle where they feel like they don't fit the mold. They don't fit the generic beauty standards that are crammed down their throat from the moment they are born to the moment they pass, because it is in everything. I remember me and my dad having a conversation about this quite young because it was so important, and I'd already noticed it. I noticed it way before he had the conversation with me, and he had it with me possibly around 7. And I maybe noticed it because I've got a very analytical mind, and I see things and I see the messaging and the patterns and things. I noticed it maybe about 3. Even in the subtle differences of what black signifies and what white signifies. But anyway, that's a video for a whole nother time. The thing that I will finish on. One of the most life-changing things that I ever did for myself was that I realised 2 things. The lens in which I see through, and I'm not talking about naivety or pretending something doesn't exist. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about the perspective in which I give something changes everything. And I don't want to be ignorant to the truth, but I also want to have enough awareness and knowledge so that I can then shift my perspective into what I am filling my brain with and my life with. So for me, although I'm not disagreeing with that, that is absolutely what that poor young girl experienced watching that. And that was her takeaway. I do believe it's a doorway where you could potentially start to plant seeds now and shift her perspective, and make brown skin a positive thing and a beauty standard in which you admire in your household intentionally. I had to start intentionally surrounding myself with content, especially online, that looked more like me, that thought more like me, because then I felt less alone. I created my own community, if you will. And I'm not ignorant. I know that all those other communities exist. I know that I'm not mainstream. I know I don't fit generic standards. I know I don't think in a generic way. I know I don't look like, generic beauty standards or skin tone. However, I'm not ignorant to it. I'm aware of it, and I now choose what I do with it. I also believe that if you want to view this badly, you will. And you absolutely get to take that away, but I don't imagine that benefits you a whole lot. And the other thing that is a fundamentally life-changing thing that I now consider when I stand for anything, the moment that you stand for something, you stand against something. And I consider that with every decision that I make and every message that I share. So the final point I will make is that I think the spark short of self was brilliant. I thought it was insightful, and I think it will resonate with those people who have already embarked on having those experiences where their difference made them isolated, and they went on a journey of abandoning themselves and then realized that that is not the way to go in order to find true happiness and connection. However, if you have not been on that journey, or alternatively you're not out at the other side of that yet, or you're not in that space where maybe it affects you, maybe it won't be for you, please let me know what your thoughts are if you have watched this. I really want to know if everybody had the same takeaways or they saw it in a completely different light entirely. Speak soon.